Assalamualaikum and good evening. My name is Muhammad Iskandar bin Shahnizam from TSLB3123. So now I'm going to explain the general meaning of feminist criticism. Okay, feminist critics is the literary analysis that arises from the perspective of feminism or feminist theories. It mainly involves the idealizers from feminism or feminist theories. The cultural aspect of the feminist criticism. Firstly, it uses the principles and ideology of feminism to critique the culture of the literature. It seeks to analyze and describe the ways in which literature portrays the narrative of male domination by exploring the economic, social, political, and psychological forces embedded within literature. This way of thinking and criticizing works can be said to have changed the way literary texts are viewed and studied, as well as changing and expanding the canon of what is commonly taught. For example, feminist critics argue that women's oppression has gone on for ages in patriarchal cultures. In this view, women's oppression has social, economic, political, and psychological aspects, and it is tied directly to the traditional system of male dominance at the head of the family. Patriarchal family structures are represented in nearly all cultures of old literary works.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very good day to Sir. My name is Muhammad Ismail, and now I will continue the presentation, which is what does feminist criticism means in literature. Okay, feminist criticism or feminist literary criticism is a literary theory that attempts to understand how gender roles, power dynamics, and women's experiences are represented in literature. It centers on how literary texts reinforce or challenge patriarchal ideologies, as well as how they influence cultural perceptions of genders. It also contends that literary works are not simply neutral representation of the world, but are embedded with cultural and social values and assumptions. Okay, basically, feminist literary criticism aims to examine on how women and femininity are depicted in literature, such as short play, short story, novels, and so on, and how male authors and male characters view and treat women in their literature.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Izzunnajwan bin Zulfa from TSLB3123. Okay, now we'll be moving on to the history of feminism criticism. Okay, firstly, feminist literary criticism, as we know it today, of feminist criticism, emerged during the second wave of feminism. There are plenty of waves of feminism. If I'm not mistaken, there were four waves, but the one that we know today emerges during the second wave of feminism. However, text which contributes to feminist literary criticism can be dated back as far as Geoffrey Chaucer's text of the Wife of Bath in his collection of stories, the Canterbury Tales in 1392, which is among the first any literary text that shows us that adapts feminism criticism among the first books or stories. Okay, now we move on to the first wave. Okay, the first wave of feminist criticism is the earliest stage of the feminist literary criticism, and it acts as the foundation of feminist literary theory, which shows us that women are not treated the same as men in terms of social lives, social rightfulness, and rights in general. And this school of thought, or this idea, is centered to the treatment of women by men themselves, and it also highlights the stereotypical presentation of women by men in their literary works such as novels, plays, and poems. Okay, and then we move on to the second wave. The second wave of the feminism focused on the gynocriticism, which is gynocriticism provide a new female-led framework for literary analysis and creating a new space of study for women writers, meaning that in the second wave it gave women authors more chance or more chance to write or to write books and novels and poems, which is female led, unlike those stereotypical literary works that were written by men, which always portrays that man is the only lead characters that can be is only man, and women is always portrayed as someone that is very weak and troublesome, anger issues, etc. So this gives a new foundation to the feminism move and feminist criticism in literature. And then we move on to the third wave. The third wave of feminism is influenced by intersectional literary criticism, and this wave recognized the limitations of second wave feminism. Particularly, it emphasizes on gender and sex when examining the treatment and portrayal of women in literature. Meaning that for the third wave, it take the foundation of the second wave of feminism, and it adds up more emphasis and issues in the society towards the treatment of women by men.
The story that I have chosen for my critique is A Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen in 1879. Firstly, I'm going to explain the overview of the story. A Doll's House explores the ways that societal expectations restrict individuals, especially women, as the young housewife Nora Helmer comes to the realization that she has spent her 8-year marriage and indeed most of her life pretending to be the person that Torvald, her father, and society at large expect her to be. At the beginning of the play, Nora believes that all she wants is to be happy, which she defines as keeping the house beautifully and having everything just as her husband Torvald likes. She further defines freedom as having more than enough money in order to create a life free from care, yet her self-sacrificing actions, illegally obtaining a loan to save her husband's life and then keeping this loan a secret in order to placate his manly pride, prevent her from attaining this freedom. As Nora realizes that her selfless actions are now the source of her sorrow, she begins to question whether the life she leads is capable of providing her with happiness. These are the key elements of this play. Firstly, Nora craves freedom and happiness, but up until the very end of the play, her definitions of these things are skewed by the conventional society she grew up. Though the lie around the forgery initially threatens Nora's marriage, its actual destruction comes via the revelation of the truth in the face of Torvald's rage. Nora sees that the real lie is the one she has been living. Her decision to leave Torvald represents her first chance to find true freedom, which she now defines as the ability to make her own choices. Nora's entire outlook on the life shifts by the end of the play, and she now understands that marriage needs equality to work, Whether Nora ever returns to Torvald and the children remains ambiguous, leaving the audience to wonder whether true, fulfilling matrimony is possible in a society that holds one gender in greater esteem than the other. Okay, now from the feminist critics perspective, A Doll's House is an important work in the field of feminist criticism. Most of the feminist critics have observed Ibsen as a revolutionary thinker, social realist, and oppressed woman of the 19th century Norway in Norway and Europe. This play describes women's rights and individual freedom. Now I'm going to explain how feminism is shown in this play. Okay, firstly, Nora as a woman, a wife, or a mother behaves like a doll. She is under the control of the invisible hands and the pressures of patriarchal society. Ibsen protests against the position of women in a masculine society which is unfair and under the hegemony of male-dominated powers. A Doll's House is a tragedy in which Nora leaves her house by slamming of a door to the world of new possibilities. She is going off to know her own responsibilities towards herself. This kind of self-realization, which usually leads to a new beginning, is one of Ibsen's main ideologies posed in his play. Nora opens her eyes and observes that her individuality and freedom have been taken in living with her husband, Torvald Helmer. Nora is a woman who will not go on living her life on illusions and with a strange man anymore. Helmer has lived according to the reasons and rationality of a man. His point of view is arranged based on power and order. For such a systematized, disciplinary man, reputation is more important than sacrificing himself for the family life. Now he sees that only the hope of a miracle left, since reason no longer accomplishes anything. Nora's winning of her individual freedom is for self-development, whereby she is to become a person in her own right and also in the sight of others. She has discovered painfully that she has treated as a nullity, and that this must be changed. In A Doll's House, the readers deal with the rigid morality of Helmer and the desire woman cannot be herself in the society of the present day of his wife is to sacrifice herself for his sake. In such a society run by masculine laws with no emotions, Nora stops her flow of feeling and says, "We have never sat down in illness together to try and get at the bottom of anything." This assertion is one of the key sentences in the feminist approach, since it expresses the moment of revelation when Nora notices that she has been treated as a second-hand creature and her indisputable rights have been ignored. Also, Nora's declaration is the climax of the play, which can be considered as an exordium of new technique and subject in the modern drama. Although, as in the classical genre, the rising action reaches its highest point based on a magnificent and lofty subject. In A Doll's House, it is about a serious discussion between a husband and a wife, which is one of the basic elements of modern drama. Due to her reasons, she cannot stay in her doll's house any longer. No more emotion and sacrifice work here. She refuses to submit to her husband anymore and wants to face the world on her own. According to the male-dominated society, Nora has done an unthinkable action as a middle-class woman in ordinary circumstances. But to the female one, she wants to prove herself as an independent human being and is continuing to struggle for the self-realization of her true self. Up to that time, few women had profited from individualism, and before Nora, no woman in fiction had ever taken such a courageous action. So that's the end of my part. Thank you.
Moving on to the second play that we have chosen to analysis using the feminist literary criticism theory is a play entitled Top Girl by Carol Churchill. Okay, the play focuses on a character named Marlene, the head of the London Employment Agency, and explores the compromises that she has had to make to achieve her hugely successful career. This play explores what it means to carve out a life within a patriarchal society. Okay, this is what next we will look at one of the scene from the one summary of the scene from the play. This is the first scene of the play. Okay, Marlene hosts an imaginary dinner party with successful women from different eras, such as women from the Europe of the Middle Ages, 19th century writers Isabella Bird and Lady Niho, 30th century Japan concubine who share stories of abuse and mistreatment due to patriarchal society in their eras. This said, the first scene in the play aims to demonstrate how patriarchy has adversely impacted women throughout history, and its societal ingredient makes it impossible for women to evade it. Okay, so this is the overview or the little bit summary of the play Top Girl. Okay, now we'll look at the issues in Top Girls. Okay, this is the issue that we have derived from the play using the feminist literary criticism. Okay, so the first issue is the structural barriers that limit women's choices and opportunities. Okay, according to the story, it aims to portray to the readers that women are often forced to choose between their personal and professional life, and they face discrimination and bias in the workplace. Okay, so as we all know, in the patriarchal society, it is already very difficult for women to get a job or achieve something of high ranking or high prestige, and if they are to achieve that, they have to sacrifice their personal life and choose their professional life. For example, in the story, Marlene has had to distance herself from her family, including her daughter Angie, in order to focus on her career. Okay, from the story, Marlene, in order to achieve her success in the employment agency, he has to abandon her daughter Angie with her sister Joyce, and because of that, the relationship between Marlene and her daughter is not very good. Yes, and especially with her sister, she doesn't have a very good relationship with her sister because she had chosen to focus on her career. The next example of the discrimination and bias she has faced in the story, okay, is when the wife of a man in her firm comes into Marlene's office to beg Marlene to forfeit her promotion, so that his husband, a man from the firm, to have the promotion. Okay, and when she refused, she berates her for being a ball breaker and holding an unnatural position in the society. Okay, and also other than that, she also faced cynicism from her other workmates or other colleagues, be it from the women or men colleagues. Okay, they belittle her achievement even though she has received her promotion fairly. Okay, from this scenario, we can see that in the story, it portrays that even though a woman can achieve a great success, their success will be belittled by men or even women, because the patriarchal ideology or patriarchal society is embedded in their mind. It's embedded in the society itself. Okay. Moving on to the second issue is life under the patriarchal society. Okay, so in this play, it utilizes stories of historical women such as Lady Niho, Patient Griselda, and Pope Joan, who have all been oppressed by a patriarchal system. Okay, as I have stated earlier in the overview or summary of the play. Okay, the first scene of the play, it started with Marlene having an imaginary dinner with a variety of historical women from different eras that have been oppressed by patriarchal systems in the eras. Okay, for example, the first one is Lady Niho from Japan, who was raised to serve the emperor and was subjected to physical and psychological abuse, which she felt powerless to escape. Okay, in the play, Lady Niho was basically become a plaything for the emperor. Okay, she has been mentally and physically abused, and until she felt that she can escape from the patriarchal life, from men's domination. And next is Patient Griselda, who was tested for her obedience by her husband, who took away her children, and eventually, after about 2 decades of marriage, he divorced her and sent her back to her to her peasant parents' home. And after that, after a little while, her husband came back with her children that was already grown up, and said that she has passed the test. From this story by Patient Griselda, we can see that even though the Griselda loved her children very much, she still submitted. She still doesn't have power to disobey his husband, because she is in a patriarchal society that way, and she is pressured to obey his husband, even though it cost her personal life with her children. Okay, last but not least, Pope Joan. Okay, this is the story of Pope Joan, who disguised herself as a man to rule as Pope, but was ultimately stoned to death for her deception. Okay, from this Pope Joan, she pretended to be a man, and after a long time of disguising as a man, she forgot how to be a woman. And after she became pregnant, when other people find out that she had deceived them all, he was stoned to death. From the story, you can see that all the year we can see that because she wants to enjoy the privilege that can be received, she can receive from being a man pope. She deceived all the peoples, and ultimately get the consequences. Okay, get the consequences of deceiving the people by being stoned to death. From all the story, we can see that because of the patriarchal society, the pressure of the patriarchal society, the women have to submit themselves and repress themselves of their true feelings and true potential, and in simply speaking, they are oppressed by the patriarchal society. Okay. Moving on to the next story.
Now we move on to the last literary work that chosen by us, which is Trifles by Susan Glaspell. Trifles is a play by Susan Glaspell. Okay, first we go with the background first, the background of the play. Okay, Trifles is a one-act play by Susan Glaspell, and the play covers the aftermath of a murder by strangled, of a farmer named John Wright, and the history of this play in the real world. During the play's first run in 1916 at the Wharf Theatre in Provincetown, Massachusetts, Glaspell herself, the author, appeared as the character Mrs. Hale. She played the character Mrs. Hale in the first run of the play. And the summary of the story is Trifles is a short play that tells us a story about a housewife, which took place in 1926, about a housewife named Minnie Wright, who killed her husband and is suspected by the man there, the powerful man there, that she killed her husband, which she did, but she has her reasons. Her husband named John Wright, due to internal marriage problems, patriarchy, and abuse. All of the problems that she is facing is all came from the underappreciating or the norms that women back in those days have to face, the injusticeness of women. And now we move on to the issues of feminism in the play itself. Okay, the first issue that we can highlight from the play is the social oppression of women. Okay, the play represents a world of strict gender roles in which men occupy the sphere of work while women exist solely in the home. Meaning that in the play it vigorously conveys that men usually they have higher posts, they have bigger jobs, such as in the play the sheriff is a man, the attorney is a man, all of the high post person is a man, while women, they have no post at all. Most of them only sits at home, clean the house, and cook for the husband, because they are not appreciated, or maybe the society, which men dominated, do not allow them to reach their full potential, because maybe the men are afraid that someday the women that they have at home might overtake them, or might have different thoughts than they what they want it to be. So that is why the man that controls the society oppresses the women from going to work in a high post, and they only need to be at home. So this is a social oppression of women that is shown by Susan Glaspell in the story, which enacts the feminism issue that were fought by many women in our history, in the course of the history. And then the second issue that we can highlight is the blindness of man. The importance of Trifles, it demonstrates the way that men, in their power and self-importance, completely overlook the importance of women and their domestic activities. As we know in the story, Minnie killed her husband we don't know exactly why, but we can we can deduct the reasons that why she might kill her husband, to maybe the husband is not only abusive and patriarchal towards her, but the husband might have killed her pet bird, because both of those because the pet bird her pet bird was found in a box with its neck being snapped, and it is believed that her husband killed that bird, and that is why she, Minnie, she cannot hold it together anymore, and she decides to kill her husband. And this is a issue which we can say that the blindness of men. Most of all of the men that is investigating the issue only focuses on a woman kill a man, and that is acceptable. Of course, killing is unacceptable, but we need to see all of other corresponding or contributing issues that might lead to the scenario, meaning that the men, blindly enough, they do not care about all those little details that women may face, that Minnie specifically may face, that made her do what she did. And this is one of the very challenging issues that are faced by women all of those years, and it is still happening today. And then the third issue that we can highlight is gender allegiance versus legal duty. The men in this play are strongly driven by their legal duties, and this equates their power as men with the power of the law, meaning that in this story all the men have high post, meaning, and the society is male dominated, the high society is male dominated, hence as a man the law is on your side because it is all dominated by men. However, the man allegiance to the law, which they see as a moral duty, is also self-serving. This is we can say like this because, as I said earlier, it is male dominated society, which makes the law is on their side. So most of the men say that it is a moral obligation to obey the law, but it is actually a self-serving because the law is on their side. If the law is not on their side, it will be a different story. They would not follow the law, but the law is on their side, so they pretend like we need to follow the law. The law is obliged to us. However, it is not a moral duty, but it is a self-serving because the law is on their side. And this is also one of the feminism issues that were faced by many women back in those days, where in the legal world, men usually have all of the specialties. And the last issue that we can highlight is justice. In the moment where Mrs. Hale turned the blame on herself when she killed her husband, the play also highlights that all of the men who aren't blaming themselves, and how many of the men's crime of varying magnitude will not go not only unpunished but unnoticed by the male control powers that be at the moment. Meaning that Mrs. Hale, Minnie, she knows that she made a terrible mistake by killing her husband, and she admits at last she killed him. But the men in the play, they do not come at all saying that it might have been her husband mistakes a little bit, but still you should not kill your husband if your husband do that. But they do not even put it in the consideration. Maybe Minnie killed her husband due to internal problems, due to abusive husband and all of that. And not only that, all of the men's crimes that are 10 times worse than what Minnie has done also may have gone unpunished and unnoticed by the male dominated society, because all of the powers is controlled by men. So they will of course support their kind. So this is the justice or injusticeness faced by women.